I know that some in our audience know the finer points of hockey.
The Chris Johnston Show.
We are your friends.
The biggest stories, bringing you inside the game.
What did you hear?
The Chris Johnston Show. Powered by Sports Interaction. Wanna bet?
What is going on?
Here's Chris with your host, Julian McKenzie.
Part of the game.
We have a lot to get to today. It's Monday, so we'll have Ask CJ. We will be talking about college players with NHL draft rights and what their fates could be after this coming weekend. Some news and notes. This is actually going to be the first time we get to talk about Jordan Binnington and the fight that wasn't against Marc-Andre Fleury, the QMJHL fight ban as well. The biggest thing we have to discuss. Unfortunately, again, Pride Night has come up as a topic of discussion in the NHL world. The San Jose Sharks recently held one of their own. They had their players wear the Pride Night jersey before a game, all except James Reimer, goaltender for the San Jose Sharks. A lot of Leafs fans remember him from his time in Toronto. He put out a statement listing his reasons why, essentially listing religious beliefs. We've seen a lot of people react to this. Steve Dangle put out a really good LFR where he, this is a guy who's a big fan of James Reimer, who basically just expressed a lot of disappointment. There's a lot of people who expressed disappointment in James Reimer for not wearing it. I know we could spend a lot of time talking about James Reimer and his reasons for doing so and the individual choices for players. I know we kind of touched off on that when this first happened with Ivan Provorov. You can touch off on that if you want to in your response, but I really want us to talk about the fact that we've seen this is the fourth team that's gotten themselves implicated in something like this. And it's official that the message that is supposed to be sent in terms of inclusivity and unity and welcomeness from these Pride Nights that are being organized by teams in the NHL has been lost as a result of players stepping up for whatever reason and saying that they don't want to wear a jersey with a rainbow on it for a warm-up. It's pretty sad to me, to be quite honest with you. But I think if you're the NHL or if you're individual teams, there's no way you're not taking notice of what has transpired over these last few weeks, and you're not at least second guessing what you do with your own Pride Night, which is a shame. It's a shame.
Well, let's not lose though the big picture, because they're not all the same. And I think what was great in San Jose is that they went ahead and every other player on the team wore the Pride Night sweater. James Reimer, of course, had to answer questions on his decision not to, and is now being subsequently judged, by everyone afterwards. I mean, that's much better than what you saw with the Rangers and the Wild, who just chose to not wear any at all to protect any number of teammates, or maybe it was only one in each case. We don't know because of what happened. And so I don't think that they're all the same. I recognize that the hit to the community might feel the same, but every other San Jose player but Reimer wore it. Every other Flyers player but Ivan Provorov wore it, originally. And so it's not. I agree that it's not coming off as well as you'd like, but it is actually a very small minority of players that are doing this. I mean, look, we'll say, in case there's any doubt here about our words, it's insane. It's a jersey with a rainbow on it. It's not saying really anything other than, as Brian Burke, I think he was quoted by the NBC affiliate in San Jose. I thought it was really, he's just saying it's welcoming everyone in the building. That's all it is. It's not aligning with a cause. It's not supporting something. It's not political. It's just, basically saying that everyone is welcome in NHL arenas. And that's something that should be the case. But this isn't, I hope, honestly, Julian, I hope if there's other players like this, I hope teams go ahead like the Sharks did and more or less, for lack of a better word, out their players that don't want to wear it. Because I actually think if you do that, you're going to go around the league and it's a very, very, very small number that don't want to wear it. And a huge percentage of the league is wearing these sweaters when given the opportunity.
Absolutely. Also, I did say a jersey with a rainbow on it. I should mention a lot of these jerseys, well, not a lot, but some of these jerseys too also have the transgender flag on it. And in the particular case of the San Jose Sharks, they do have an insignia on, I think, the shark if I remember correctly as well. So that can't be lost in this. And you bring up a good point. Like, there, because of how San Jose went about it, we all knew it was James Reimer, and he put himself front and center, essentially to discuss why he went about what he did. My thinking is, I just wonder if there's somebody who, you know, up in the league office who's seeing what's going on, or if players are realizing, like, oh no, if we're going to make this decision, you know, we're going to have to go through all that. And I'm not saying that should be an excuse. I'm just wondering if someone is noticing all of that, and they're saying, well, to avoid any unpleasantness, because there are genuine stories that are getting uncovered. I brought up the fact that Scott Lawton and James Van Riemsdyk had non-binary fans. They welcomed them as part of their Pride Night the night Ivan Provorov decided not to wear a Pride Night jersey. I wonder if someone is noticing around the league that those types of stories are getting lost in all of this coverage that ends up happening when a player decides to sit out, and that could radically change how we view these types of nights going forward.
Well, they can't control the coverage, right? This is the nature of our job. Like, you know, just to make an analogy, like Canada announces an Olympic team, and we focus on the 3 guys who didn't make it rather than the 23 or 25 who did. I mean, this is kind of, you know, what happens, just the way the media discusses stories in general. I think the league can't control that. There's no going back, I don't think. I mean, obviously, each individual team now has sort of decisions to make, but as a league, I mean, you know, this is an important initiative, and there's a reason why every team, more or less, I think, does it every year. You know, and I think that the problem really is you got 800 plus players in the league. I mean, on any given issue, there's going to be some extreme views one way or the other. You're not going to find perfect alignment everywhere. And, you know, as I say, I think more teams should go ahead, like San Jose and even like Philly did. I'm not sure if Philly managed the situation perfectly well in the moment, but with some reflection, at least, you know, they did go ahead and you find out what's there, and fans are free to choose. You know, someone like James Reimer is incredibly popular, not just with Steve Dangle. Lots of people around Toronto, I'm sure there's now different views about him. You know, that's something I'm sure he can live with, but like, this is society. I say lots of things, maybe not political in nature, about hockey all the time, and you can choose to want to listen, or you can say that guy's an idiot and I'm going to go over to some other podcast. I mean, this is the world in which we live. We're exchanging ideas and thoughts. Some are easier to take than others. And I think, look, we do live in a free society. We live in a place where James Reimer can make that decision. And now we all have the freedom to decide what we feel about it. And I think you and I are pretty aligned here that we just don't understand. You know, he puts out a statement saying he has no hate in his heart, you know, and knowing him a little bit, I have to be honest too, like, that's the way he comes across, honestly. I mean, just in my dealings with him, he was really one of the easier guys to deal with in the league. I don't believe he comes from a position of hate, but maybe, you know, he's not recognizing what taking this stand indicates to a lot of different people who want to love this game and have loved and supported him, and now are having, you know, mixed thoughts about that moving forward.
The Brian Burke quote that went around with regards to what happened, I'll just read it here. I repeat that I am extremely disappointed. I wish players would understand that the Pride sweaters are about inclusion and welcoming everybody. A player wearing Pride colors or tape isn't endorsing a set of values or enlisting in the cause. He is saying you are welcome here, and you are in every single NHL building.
Perfect.
Which, yeah, it's just, it's right there. Like, I don't know. I just couldn't believe the contradictory message in Reimer's message. I said I didn't want to get into his message too much, but I did want to mention that, where on one hand you're saying, you know, you're basically trying to come across as someone who is cool with everybody and welcoming of everybody, but you're not going to take that extra step to, you know, do something that will make other people, a marginalized community, feel welcome because you don't approve of their quote unquote lifestyle. Yeah, it's a bit weird. And then off of that too, there were the comments he made about Nazem Kadri, where he starts discussing more religion and the fact that, you know, he would understand if it was a Muslim appreciation night and he didn't wear a jersey in support of him. Like, I just felt with the way James Reimer kind of handled it, while yes, you know, it's weird to say good on him for answering questions that way. I mean, he could have ducked, but also it just felt like the hole he was digging for himself was not good. It just felt like he was digging himself a hole.
Right.
Anyway.
Well, and let's shout out Brian Burke too, though. I mean, he's been way ahead of this curve in hockey. He's done a lot in this file. Obviously, very close personal issue with him, with his son Brendan having come out as gay prior to his tragic death, 12 years ago. But Brian Burke is the what would you call him? The definitive hockey man, the sort of gruff talking, straight shooting guy. But he's done a lot for You Can Play and lots of other charities and initiatives in this space, and continues to do so in his son's honor. And so, again, there's a lot of good being done, or there's a lot of people that are really trying to help here. And we do shine the light sometimes, unfortunately, on the negative stories when there's a lot of positive ones out there.
Yeah. One final thing before we get to sports interaction. Marissa and Jemmy put out a really cool thread of gay and non-binary fans who were at that San Jose game, and she managed to get a lot of their stories. I'll try to retweet it on my own personal Twitter because it was a really cool thread, and I hope people see that thread, and I hope they understand what nights like that mean to people like them.
And we're just talking about people, man. This is what I always think. Like, there's lots of people who walk different shoes and different things than I have. I don't have to understand everything they've been through, but I think that being an empathetic and supportive person, I mean, really, really shouldn't be that hard.
It shouldn't be that hard. Anyway, we will transition over to You Can Bet That with David Bastel, and then we will get to the rest of our show.
You Can Bet That with David Bastel. Brought to you by Sports Interaction. Get in the action and make a play. 19 plus. Please play responsibly.
Welcome to You Can Bet That with David Bastel, who is back with us finally, and he decided to come back wearing a Montreal Expos shirt.
Thanks. Spring training's around the corner, man. That's, opening day, right? It's my favorite team, by the way. I know they don't exist. I know.
Yeah, I know. Look, I love going to Jays games as much as the next guy, but nos amours, always in my heart. Remember to hit up sportsinteraction.com/SDPN for all of your gaming needs. On today's edition of You Can Bet That, William Nylander is the theme today.
Yeah, there's a couple Nylander props, and we put this up earlier in the year, and now we're kind of getting down to the nitty gritty. So 13 games left for the Toronto Maple Leafs. He's at 35 goals. Sports Interaction targeted 42.5. It's within a range, obviously, and it's actually split between yes to the over, no to the under. Virtually the same. So 13 games left, 35 goals. He needs 8. Does he get there? Does he sit out CJ? Because you're in that situation where it's like, let's start sitting out some guys near the end of the schedule. That could play a big factor in this bet.
It could. And the odds makers have nailed this one. I mean, I'm actually inclined probably to go to the under there. I mean, half a goal a game is pushing it, but I think he'll get to 40 if he keeps surging beyond that. One thing too to keep in mind: the Leafs actually aren't carrying many extra forwards right now.
Right.
They have the injury to Ryan O'Reilly and Noel Acciari. It's not to say they can't bring someone up from the American Hockey League and sit guys out, but I would expect with assuming his own health is okay, that Nylander will play most or all of the remaining games.
Yep.
All right.
Now, part two.
Yes,
Here's the interesting part. This was not much of a bet about a month ago, but now things have gotten a little bit interesting. So somewhere in January, we threw out, will William Nylander lead the team in goal scoring? He's at 35. Austin Matthews is at 32. And the no bet is worth 3-1. So does Matthews chase him and surpass him? He can't tie him. He has to surpass him. That's the most interesting one of the two, in my opinion.
It would not surprise me. Matthews has been heating up and seeing in the way he's played. I could see him surging towards 40. I know that's a big ask, 8 goals in the 13 games, but given what that guy's done, it's hard to bet against him, put it that way. I think a lot of money's been lost betting against Austin Matthews.
Before we let you go, DB, favorite Expo of all time?
Oh, geez. Tim Raines.
That's really good. The Rock.
I did have a fantasy baseball camp with Andre Dawson though, and he kind of
you
moved up
were
there.
at those? I've heard legends about those.
Yeah, and I've always liked Tim Wallach. I've always liked Gary Carter and Steve Rogers to this day, even though I was a little too young for the time against the Dodgers, kind of rubs me the wrong way when I see highlights of it. So it's what about you? What about you? Quickly.
Vladimir Guerrero is my all-time favorite. I asked for a photo with him last year. That did not happen. He's still my favorite.
Okay.
His son isn't too bad either.
Yeah, his son's okay too. You're right.
His son's good too. Montreal native Vladimir Guerrero Jr. Don't forget to check out sportsinteraction.com/SDPN for all the best odds. 4-game, in-game, best props again. sportsinteraction.com/SDPN. DB, we'll talk soon.
Be well.
This episode of the CJ Show is brought to you by NordVPN. You tired of those regional blackouts when you're trying to watch your favorite sport? With NordVPN, you can switch your virtual location to a country or part of the world that is showing the event you want to watch, so that way you don't miss out and you can watch the action live. You may be getting concerned about your private data being thrown out there and people invading your privacy, and you might not be the most tech-savvy person. Luckily for you, NordVPN is a one-stop shop for all things cybersecurity. It is incredibly easy to use, and with just one click, you're protected. With your NordVPN account, you can have up to 6 devices protected. It's like your laptop, your cell phone, what other devices, what else you can use to put on there. Just all these different devices you could just use. Up to 6. Pretty great. You no longer have to worry about hackers, malicious sites, pop-ups, just for the price of a cup of coffee a month. You have complete peace of mind knowing that your devices and data are protected. A small price to pay for premium security and access to a vast amount of entertaining content from all over the world. Grab your exclusive NordVPN deal by going to nordvpn.com/CJ Show to get a huge discount off your NordVPN plan plus 4 months for free. It's completely risk-free with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. This episode of the Chris Johnston Show is sponsored by Athletic Greens. I take AG1 by Athletic Greens literally every day. I gave it a try because I wanted better gut health, sustained energy, a better immune system as well. And taking all these pills and vitamins, it really gets so tedious after a while. It's just like, whatever. I can't do all of those all at once. But thanks to AG1, you're setting yourself up with 75 high-quality ingredients that give you key daily nutrients for better long-term gut health and support. It is a micro habit that delivers macro benefits, and almost everybody who takes it ends up taking great care of themselves every single day. The fact, look, 75 high-quality ingredients and key daily nutrients, super cool. Super cool. You got to take care of ourselves in this life, man. Got to take care of yourself. And AG1 helps to do that. If a comprehensive solution is what you need from your supplement routine, then Athletic Greens is giving you a free 1-year supply of vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your very first purchase. Go to athleticgreens.com/Johnston. That's athleticgreens.com/Johnston. Check it out. Before the James Reimer debacle over the weekend, the biggest NHL story involved a fight that wasn't, and a reaction that was also in the eye of criticism and talk. And one player who seems to put himself in these types of situations, just trying to be a tough guy. And, maybe he'll get into a scrap. He's never actually been in one in the NHL. He's been in 2 in the AHL. But Jordan Binnington, the fight that wasn't, the eventual 2-game suspension for his reaction after a little bit of a clip with Ryan Hartman, and then kind of going at him. What did you think of that whole debacle with Jordan Binnington and everything that has come after that?
This is where I'm going to sort of out myself because,
oh boy,
on one hand, like I think we're shifting away from slap shot style hockey. But then on the other hand, when there's a possibility of 2 goalies fighting, I become a mouth breather who's all lathered up about it. Like I will admit this is my own what do you call that? I mean, this is where I don't make sense. I'm incongruent here, but I would have liked to have seen the fight. I don't know why. It's just like curiosity. There's something, it's like my inner 5-year-old wants to see a little rumble on the schoolyard. And, especially with Jordan Binnington, right? Like, it's funny you mentioned he hasn't been in an NHL fight. I feel like it's still inevitable, right? I mean, he's always mixing it up. He's always chirping the other team's bench. It just seems inevitable. I mean, even it was perfect, Julian. I'm sure you saw it, but the Minnesota Wild just happened to have a clip of Marc-Andre Fleury mic'd up. So you can actually see what he's saying going down the ice. And he's basically like, this guy's always looking for it. Like, let's let him have it. And had he fought Fleury, one of the oldest goalies in the league, one of maybe the game's sort of like classic nice guys, goofballs, that sort of clash would have been interesting. I grew up as a kid remembering Felix Potvin fighting Ron Hextall was like kind of like a huge moment. I know this would have been before your time, but that was like, holy crap. Like, did you see that? I would have loved to see the fight. And I realize I'm now just a Neanderthal cheering for combat, but it would have been great in that instance. I understand in some ways, look, the referees, don't want to take Fleury out of the game. I think that they're just trying to get Binnington off the ice, basically, to mitigate anything worse. The fact that he got a 2-game suspension too. I subscribe to Steve Dangle's thought that it's sort of like a lifetime achievement award. It's not that anything was so much more, not that anything there was so much more grotesque, but it's almost like we have to send you a message, try to calm you down, hit you in the pocketbook, what have you. But look at Binnington runs hot. I think we're going to see him at some point fight someone. And unfortunately that could have been a nationally televised game in the US. The fans wanted it. And I wanted it as much as I'm trying to be above that kind of thing.
I also wonder if that would have been that moment. And now that he gets the suspension, like, how does that affect his hot-headedness going forward? I mean, he already threw the punch at Ryan Hartman, and then after all that, like, we really, honestly, I'm in the same boat as you with those types of fights. I think like an organized, premeditated fight is stupid, or if like some big hit happens and you have to stand up for your guy as retribution, I think that's just like, okay, like, what are we doing? We don't need to do this. But the idea of two goalies going at it, like you mentioned, Ron Hextall versus Felix Potvin, my generation is probably thinking Martin Biron versus Ray Emery in that
Right.
Senators Sabres debacle. Like, I when chaos goes on, like, well, there's nothing you could do, and we are both united in the fact that we love chaos happening. So, like, yeah, it is the big contradiction with fighting.
I see it, the contradiction, though. I'm calling it out on both of us. Like,
oh yeah, but I see it too. Like, there is the side that says we don't like it when players are stepping up and fighting, and we're seeing the game transition out of that, where players whose sole reasons for being in lineups is to be an enforcer, like, that's dying out. But man, like, two goalies going at it, we lose everything. Like, there's an entertainment value. There's something in our serotonin that goes up when we see that possibility, because it's such an unlikely occurrence that when it happens, you're like, holy crap. Like, we like what? Like, you stop everything.
Yeah. And here's the thing too. It's basically because the goalie, it's a different game for the goalie, right? Like, the goalie,
absolutely,
everything, like, there's nothing the same. The equipment, their experience, what they're doing, the way they train, everything is so different. So it's like a goalie goal, you go bananas. Like, Twitter goes nuts when Linus Ullmark scores that goal this year. And for all the goaltenders before. And I remember that stuff as a kid, like when Marty Brodeur started scoring goals and stuff like that was cool. And then when they fight, I mean, it's just so, again, it's barbaric. But, has there been, I don't even remember the last goalie fight. It's pretty rare. That's more to your point. There's not one a year on average. There's definitely not. So it's kind of like, it's like seeing an eclipse or something. It's like you've seen something that is very rare and special, and you don't know when you're going to see it again. And look, you're to the larger point on Binnington. How many players over the years, whether it's, say, Tom Wilson, or we can go back over, they like repeatedly get dinged, but they play on a certain edge. That they obviously draw some of their success from being on that edge. I think for Binnington, I think he's obviously engaged in the game. I'm not saying that here to defend him, but I think probably part of what's pushed him to this level is that he has that competitive fire that sometimes boils over. He's going to forget the whatever 40 or 50,000 bucks that he just donated to the players' emergency fund, and he'll be in a game again at some point in the future, and tempers are going to flare. and some goalie at the other end of the ice is going to come down, and we're going to finally see it. I would, if we could get a you can bet that odds on Jordan Binnington's career over under fights at 0.15, I would be taking the over.
And I can't wait to see him raise his arms and, yell at the crowd as he gets kicked out after allowing 5 goals again. That's the worst part about it. If Jordan Binnington was like pitching a shutout or something, or like it's a close game and he does that, we look like, yo, you're a rock star. But let's be real here. I'll say it. You could agree if not. There's some kind of weird thing about how Jordan Binnington reacts to these things, where instead of us like looking at him and thinking, man, like this guy should be really cool, there are people who kind of low-key think he's a loser. Because like, look, you're trying to be this tough guy trying to start these fights, and they don't happen. The one time it happens, like or at least it almost happens, it gets broken up, and then you're getting like paraded out. Oh, not paraded out, but like you're getting let out, and you're doing all the pomp and circumstance. He's
a heel, man. He's a heel.
No, I love that too, but like, bruh, you allowed 5 goals. You're losing the game. Like
he's embracing his inner heel. He doesn't care what you think of him. Like your hate is his energy. Like, I mean, this is the same guy. Didn't he throw a water bottle at Nazem Kadri?
He threw a water ball at Nazem Kadri while he was doing an interview. It's loser behavior.
Sure, I'm not defending it, but I'm explaining it as I understand it. Like, I should be clear, but I just think he lives for your hate. He lives for your tears. He wants to break your soul. Every sport needs this, or every sort of play needs this kind of tension, right? Like he doesn't care if he's beloved. He's, like Marc-Andre Fleury couldn't be more beloved, even by opposing players and fans. Like, it's any clip you see that guy, like he's speaking to both his posts in both languages because he doesn't know where the steel come from. Like, he's just a character and seems like a really nice guy. That would have been the juxtaposition of those two fighting too, would have been almost too perfect. It's, we're never going to get another shot at that. That was a one-off, and the linesmen were doing their job, but they got in the way.
Yeah, I thought at one point this year when the Flames and Wild played against each other, the biggest fight we would have missed out this year was Ryan Reeves and Milan Lucic going at each other. We did not get that. I did not expect Jordan Binnington and Marc-Andre Fleury to supplant that. But one last thing, what did you think of Binnington's quote saying that he felt like the character from Goodwill Hunting when he was defending himself?
I laughed my ass off at that. That was good. I mean, finally, a movie reference, first of all, that I didn't have to like Google to figure out what happened. Goodwill Hunting is a movie I saw many times back in the day. And yeah, I mean,
you saw many times back in the day. Was that like what was that?
I don't know why. Yeah, I really liked it. It was good.
Was that the movie was that the movie you were like, man, I gotta take the shawty with me? I gotta take my girl with me?
No, I don't think so. I can't remember what year that thing came out, but I'll say this. This is actually a little known fact, but there used to be a pub in Toronto. It's since closed, called Upfront. It was the absolute hockey writer hangout, and the bar scene from Goodwill Hunting was filmed in there. The one where he goes, "Do you like them apples?" And he comes up against the door, and that was in Toronto. And on the servers' shirts that they would wear at Upfront in the day, it would say "Good Wing Hunting" as a nod to the fact that Goodwill Hunting was there. And that was a classic Toronto media. Some Blue Jays used to hang out there in the day. Some hockey agents would be there. It was like kind of a classic place where sports mixed in Toronto that we don't have anymore. And I miss the Upfront. And anyway, that's a random tag on to Goodwill Hunting.
So it's like, Upfront would have been like the Toronto equivalent of Hurley's in Montreal.
Yeah, maybe a little seedier, if I'm being honest. Like it was, not that it was, but it was it had some dive-ish qualities. But it was a big hangout back in early 2000s to about 2010 era of sports journalists based in Toronto.
Okay, let's roll through some more of these topics while we still have a bit of time. So on the subject of fighting, did you notice the impending fight ban to come in the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League? Once they get that ratified later this year, it is expected to come into place where if a player takes part in a fight in the queue, they will be handed a match penalty. Yeah,
I'm not surprised by this. I mean, it's kind of felt inevitable, right? And this is the counter lever to our previous conversation in that, I mean, fighting has been drastically reduced in all levels of hockey over the last 20 years. I remember I was at the GM meetings last week. I remember going to the GM meetings early in my career, and there was a lot of talks about stage fights and this, and trying to get that out of the game. Obviously, we really don't see very many true enforcers, if any, in the league at this stage. And so it kind of makes sense that the junior leagues will be the first eventually to completely outlaw it or ban it. And this is something that sounds like the government is pushing a little bit in Quebec with the QMJHL. Not yet clear if the OHL and WHL will follow suit. Doesn't sound like they will for next season, but look, they're now going to get a chance to see what it does. What's the repercussions? Does it just happen smoothly and no one really talks about it, and then you move on? Then you're probably going to see it in all junior hockey. And I really do believe you're going to have a day in the NHL where similar type penalties are there. I don't know when that's going to be. I can't tell you the date, but I can tell you that the outcome will shift in that direction eventually. And I think the league's policy, the NHL's that is, has more been, look, this is just going to weed itself out over time. I mean, if no one's fighting in junior, why would they all of a sudden, get to the NHL and start fighting? And the same in Europe, right? I mean, European hockey fights are almost non-existent. Peter Holland, a former player for the Maple Leafs, his last year he played in Sweden for Djurgården, and something happened on the ice and he dropped his gloves and fought a guy and didn't even know, but he got, I think, a 5-game suspension for that because he didn't realize it wasn't allowed. He just, he's always played hockey. So I think the more and more leagues where you can't fight, you're just not going to have fighting at all, except for when Jordan Binnington ticks someone off. And then we'll allow one exception per year for a Jordan Binnington goalie fight.
I wonder how many more players are going to speak out with their opinions on this. I know the other day, Ryan Leslie of Sportsnet and we were talking to Max Domi about it, and he's basically saying it was a pretty bad call on their part, and kind of cited his reasons why fighting is still kind of important in the game. In fact, just like the last few weeks, just talking to a couple guys about it, like there's definitely still like a couple of guys who kind of push back against the notion that like fighting should be dead, and kind of mentioned essentially just as a way to protect star players. So it's interesting to see that we see that it is being phased out, and we're seeing something like what could be happening in the QMJHL happen. But I wonder, as more of these things start to happen, how much more of that pushback we will see, at least from a vocal standpoint, from NHL players. I think we're going to see more of it.
I agree. I mean, look, it's for those that have grown up in the game, that play the game at that level, it's viewed as kind of like a escape hatch, like a chance to let out some exhaust, right? And hockey's a very physical, intense sport. It's what we love about it. I mean, if you ever get the chance to sit down low, even an AHL game, or an NHL game in the bottom level, I mean, it's so fast, it's so intense. When you see how little time the players have with the puck on their stick before someone's really trying to hit them, I mean, you can imagine being in that environment as much as we can imagine. I mean, I can't imagine being an NHL player, but I can imagine you feel kind of like you're in combat, like you're really out there protecting yourself. And so, it has been a part of the sport, but I just think everything evolves and changes over time. We argue and argue and argue about lacrosse goals or this or that, but over time, eventually it's just what people do. Max Domi may not like it. His dad, Ty Domi, fought 300 plus times as an NHL player, over 1,000+ game career. I sure he's, I'm certainly not disputing his opinion or dismissing it, but I think it's natural that he has that opinion. But the more players that grow up never having to fight or never thinking about it, as they eventually get to the NHL, I mean, the NHL is going to change. Everything changes and evolves over time. And so this is the evolution point, Julian. As I say, it might take 10 more years before it's completely out at the NHL level, but I do predict it's going to happen.
Very quickly here, there was a big hit involving Matt Dumba and Evgeny Kuznetsov in a Wild Capitals game from over the weekend. Kuznetsov gets kind of, he gets hit by Dumba, gets caught pretty high, shoulder to the head. I wonder if we're going to get a hearing. I don't know off the top of my head what Matt Dumba's history is, but it looks pretty high. I don't like hits to the head, so I would imagine there would be some kind of call from the Dops. What do you think?
Well, and the league doesn't like hits to the head either, and there's two kinds, right? Sometimes a player drives up through someone and maybe hits them in the chest, and then unfortunately the head gets caught as a sort of a secondary point of contact. But I think generally when it's the primary place you're hitting someone, that's problematic. Sometimes a height differences at play. I don't think that's the case in Dumba, Kuznetsov. And so, I would think that there's certainly that a player safety, a clip like that's kind of on the line. They're circulating that among their group and trying to decide. And we'll see where they end up landing, but wouldn't surprise me to see a suspension there.
Okay. One last thing before we get to ask CJ, are you paying attention at all to the NCAA men's hockey tournament? I believe it starts on Friday. We both live in markets where the teams we cover have a notable prospect who many are waiting on to sign entry-level contracts afterward. I have Matthew Coronato in Calgary, Matthew Knies in Toronto. I believe they're on opposite sides of the bracket for their respective universities. Just curious if you're paying attention to that.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a cool time of year. Those games are great. Lots of entertainment in them. And then obviously there's players, every game you see with an elimination game, there's someone on the team that's losing that has NHL rights belonging somewhere. And there's at least the decision to sign. I mean, it's interesting. A couple of things can happen. You can see a player sign an entry-level deal that kicks in next season, and then they typically sign a pro tryout agreement to spend the rest of this year in the AHL. I think what'll be different about both Knies and Coronato is you'll see them sign an entry-level contract that begins this year. And because both of them are 20 years old or older than 19, in this case for the rule, the first year their contract gets burned right away. And, that can have, it's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, this is what Johnny Gaudreau did back in the day too. He played, I think, one game at the end of the season and burned a year of his contract, but then you don't have rights to sign an offer sheet when you become an RFA after your first contract. So, I mean, there's good and bad there. I think in the case of Knies, it's intriguing for the Maple Leafs because, I think that there's a world that he plays playoff games this year. It's not a guarantee. And, I would say, I asked actually Kyle Dubas a couple questions about Knies at the GM's meeting. Like, you get the feeling from the organization. They want to stop the hype train before it even begins. Like, I don't think that they're viewing him as needing to be an immediate solution. They want his focus to be with the University of Minnesota, one of the best teams in the country, have a chance to win a national championship, and then maybe play a couple of regular season games. That's the bonus, the icing on his cake after signing a contract. But, if you look at the Leafs right now, they're not carrying an abundance of forwards. I think certainly, they just played a game on the weekend where their bottom two forwards were Bobby McMahon, who they called up from the AHL, and Wayne Simmons. I think you're comfortable slotting Knies ahead of those two. So even in a situation where Ryan O'Reilly gets healthy after his finger recovers from surgery, or Noel Acciari returns to the lineup, I think there's still room in their 12 for Knies, but it just depends on what he does. And what works in his favor, Julian, is he's a physical guy. He's in stature, he's big, and so I don't think you have as much fear about him just jumping into playing against men, how he's going to react. But I mean, none of us have a crystal ball to say how well he's going to perform in that environment. But I think what's intriguing is Toronto has left open one contract slot, and it fluctuates on a given day depending on who they've called up. But for argument's sake, they've left $925,000 available on their cap sheet, and they have an ability to sign him to a maximum $925,000 contract and use up that contract slot and put him into games, and then we'll see where he goes. As for Coronato, it does sound as though there's no reason to be concerned there in terms of his intentions. I think that, you're always nervous. I mean, if we had a Norris Trophy discussion right now, we might be talking about Adam Fox as being certainly among the favorites.
He still gets booed. He still gets booed here.
And he was drafted by Calgary. For those that aren't familiar, didn't sign with the Flames. He actually had his rights traded to Carolina, didn't sign with Carolina, and ultimately as a free agent coming out of college, signed with the Rangers. And he's won a Norris Trophy in 2021. He will probably be a finalist, I'm willing to say, in 2023, and potentially he's going to win. So I think that there's a sensitivity when you've seen a really good player go sign somewhere else that your organization's drafted. But I don't think that needs to be a case with Coronato. I would expect he'll sign. And, the real issue, honestly, is if his team ends up playing right till the end. I mean, it might be only a handful of games he can get into. But that being said, they could lose on Friday or Saturday this weekend, and then he could be a Calgary Flame by the time we're recording next Monday's episode.
Before we move on here on the CJ Show, let's talk about Formula One of the biggest sports in the world, one of the fastest rising sports in the world. You've probably watched Drive to Survive on Netflix. Great show. A new season is underway. Red Bull and Ferrari leading the pack. Kind of like Lewis Hamilton a little bit more, but it doesn't matter. I have some good news for you. If you are into F1 and you would love to listen to a podcast that talks about F1 and even IndyCar, we have that here just for you at the STPN. The podcast is called Nailing the Apex, and Tim Haraney, who used to be a race car driver himself and is now turned into a very notable auto racing insider. He is the man behind the wheel of this podcast, and you can listen to it through the SDPN. They drop 3 episodes a week, race weekend coverage, the biggest stories from the paddock, and special guests. They have it all covered. Welcome to the SDPN, Tim. We are so excited to have you on board, and make sure you listen to Nailing the Apex. Big Money Siege, it's about that time for Ask CJ, the segment of our show where we take in questions from viewers and listeners like you who send in questions over Twitter or Discord. I want to shout out someone off of Discord before we get started, though. Did you see the hockey cards made of us by user, I believe their name is Daniel, but they spelled Daniel Danyul, at least on their Discord. There's some hockey cards they made of us.
Yeah, I saw that. Those are pretty cool, man. They're like the vintage style. They went and grabbed my Coburg, my rosy-cheeked 10-year-old self hockey picture. They found a cool one of you on some skates. I think they did a great job.
Well, so the story with that is they originally used the photo of me from our podcast logo, and they were like, can anyone find a photo of me on skates? I do not have skates, so I legit just put on my ball hockey uniform and my helmet in my room and just took a photo of myself and sent it to them.
I wish we had video of that. You look like a damn fool.
You're not wrong. I just wanted to look genuine. I mean, you have a cool one when you played hockey. I wanted one too. But yeah, now you know the inside story when you see the photos up on Twitter. Anyway, let's get to these questions.
I should have sent them a picture from my family skate, because I did a family skate. We always do one around the Christmas time, and I was wearing my SDPN sweater on the ice.
Yeah.
So I'll maybe next year or next time I have that on, I'll do the hockey pose with my SDPN sweater.
Are you opposed, if we ever do that Coburg live show, to wearing your SDPN jersey?
Oh no, I'm sure I would.
All right, because I might do that. I don't know, just
I haven't had it on too many times. Literally that one family skate, obviously the very first show when they gave it to me. But I don't have an opportunity to wear a hockey sweater much. I mean, most people wear them to games, but when I go to games like you, I'm sitting in the press box, so it's not necessarily appropriate.
Yeah, that's true. I'm afraid of wearing that SDPN one in public because I don't want people thinking like, "Oh, you're a Leafs fan." Not that there's anything wrong with being a Leafs fan. It's just, professionalism and all that. Anyway, speaking of the Leafs, here's a question from Jorge416. Hi, CJ. I'm predicting regardless of the outcome in the playoffs, Kyle Dubas is going to test free agency and sign with another team. If the Leafs do poorly, i.e. lose in the first round, does Brendan Shanahan get the boot with Sheldon Keefe? Conversely, if they only win a round, do they stay?
That's like a hypothetical of a hypothetical of a hypothetical.
Yeah, there's a lot of hypotheticals here.
And Jorge, I do appreciate the question. So I'm not actually picking on you, but I mean, I think the real answer is how can anybody know? I think what happens will obviously have an impact on the decisions that are going to impact the organization. But how do they lose? What's the feeling at that time? There's some people that are saying that even if the Leafs lose in the first round, now the Leafs are still going to try to retain Kyle Dubas. If that's the case, I don't really understand how we even got to this point, but let's not relitigate the past. I've been pretty clear. I think that even with the disappointments that he probably should have been extended last summer, I think honestly, candidly, I think it's risky of the Leafs to allow it to get to the stage where he can choose to walk away. I have no reason to believe he wants to do that. I should be very clear, explicit even, that I'm not speaking for Kyle, and I don't know what is in his mind, but the truth is just having been through my own contract decision, sometimes when you get to the point where it expires, there's a lot of emotions with that because you're feeling like the other side maybe doesn't value you the way you value yourself. And sometimes it opens your mind to other possibilities. I even remember Daniel Alfredson, who was a lifelong Senator. You know, his last contract, that the Senators weren't willing to pay him at the time what he thought he was worth. And he said he never imagined leaving Ottawa until you get right to the free agency. And all of a sudden you start thinking like, oh, what about this and this and this? And, you know, eventually that leads to him ending up in Detroit. So, you know, even if Kyle doesn't intend to leave, who knows how he feels at the end of the season. And I do think he would not have to wait very long to get another job. As for what happens with Brendan Shanahan, I've got no reason to believe he isn't safe. He's got a contract that extends beyond this year. You know, I think in a lot of ways, Sheldon Keefe is probably tied to Kyle Dubas, whether that's fair or not, but it's, you know, those two have worked together now in 3 different circumstances, if you include the OHL, the AHL, and now the NHL. You know, Sheldon has, I think, the best winning percentage by any NHL coach in their first 200 games ever. So, you know, I'm not here trying to explain it. If they lose in 7 to Tampa again, like, I get that maybe something has to change, but basically the Leafs organization is doing a lot right, except for what happens in the playoffs. That's been the truth. I mean, if you look, once again, they're among the top 5 teams in the league. They're going to finish with well more than 100 points again. Their underlying numbers are strong again. Even with all the chaos in net, they're still among the best teams in the league. Samsonov's had a great year for them. So I don't know what's going to happen. I've said it though previously. I think that the Leafs offseason has the possibility of being more dramatic than even what happens in the playoffs. And that's saying something because the playoffs is the best time of year.
For those keeping track at home, not only do CJ and I have to look out for notable college players with draft rights tied to our respective teams, we also have to look out for GMs on expiring contracts and possibly drastic off seasons to come.
Right.
We're not
and
so
maybe
different,
not,
you and
right?
I.
And maybe not. Like, that's a funny thing. Maybe the Leafs win a round or 2 or whatever it is, and Kyle signs a new extension right away, and there's no drama, right? Like that's possible. But I mean, this is setting up for drama. I mean, what are we at now? March 20th?
March 20th.
Like his contract expires on June 30th. There's not a lot of days between then and now. I mean, there's enough to negotiate an extension. But I actually think he's in the driver's seat. As weird as that sounds. I think he has maybe not all the leverage, but most of the leverage. And I believe you can't have an alternate universe, but I believe it would have been cheaper and easier to lock him up last summer than what's going to come now. But it's not my money, and it's not my decision.
I get that. From Aaron, is it a good idea to put $100 on the Panthers beating the Bruins in the first round?
Here's my view on this. I should not be giving out any gambling advice. And mostly because if I just tweet a team is a juggernaut, crazy things, bad things happen to that team. So no matter what I speak into existence here, I feel like I'm gonna be a chill on one side or the other. And so all I will say, my friend, is go where your brain and your heart takes you. I wish you good luck with your bet. I hope it turns out. But I'm taking the 5th on this because I don't ever know what to think. I mean, truthfully, this is what I think about sports. It is random and chaotic and not always easily explained as much as we have ways to explain it. And that's part of what makes it wonderful and beautiful. So, I mean, maybe the Bruins, could the Bruins lose after this season in the first round? What do you think, Julian? That they've won a lot of games.
I see a world where they don't even get to the final. I've said that on the Athletic Hockey Show. Actually, I don't know if you realize it, but Ian Mendez and I have taken up a bet where if the Bruins, I think if they make it to the Stanley Cup final and win, we will pick a punishment handed out by one of our listeners over there. Someone suggested that if the Bruins win the cup, we have to get in touch with Brad Marchand, and Brad Marchand basically has to berate us for the entirety of an episode.
Well, the history is not on your side there. Or sorry, history is on your side. The NHL's regular season champion is rarely its playoff/Stanley Cup champion. It's happened over time, but it's exceedingly rare. Now, it's also rare to have a team as dominant as Boston has been this year. There's obviously someone at the top every year, but they've been lapping the field. I don't even know what, they put a 7 spot on Buffalo on Sunday. Like, they're just relentless. Like they are, like there's no signs of slowing down. I know they lost a couple games recently, but come on, they're next level. So it's going to be fascinating to see what happens with them.
Also, if you account for other sports in the Big Four, the New England Patriots, the Golden State Warriors, the Seattle Mariners, all teams with dominant, incredible regular seasons, the best in their respective sports. None of those teams came out as winners when it was all said and done.
Detroit Red Wings, too. Was it 95-96? I think that they had the crazy point record and lost in round 1. So
95-96? Right,
I
the
believe
Devils
so.
won that year. Didn't the Devils win that year?
No, the Avalanche won the cup that year.
No,
but
95. Yep, the Avs won that year. I know
but I'm
Red
pretty
Wings won at some
sure
point.
the Red Wings, did they have a 60-win season, I want to say?
Jeez.
Anyway, I might be. Anyway, they had a crazy season. I might be getting the year wrong. I'm sorry. Time is relentless and does things to your brain and your memory. But I believe it was the 95-96 Wings that had an awesome season and went out in round 1.
62, 13-7. That looks pretty sick to me.
Yes.
Winners of their division, President's Trophy winners, and looking for, as I'm trying to remember for myself now.
So it's 131 points, right?
Yeah, like it's the 131 points.
That's insane. And they lost in round 1.
That's ridiculous. Like, I'm trying to remember that off. I mean, I was a baby in 1996, but
right. But if we were doing this podcast, then we would have went into that playoff saying like the Red Wings are it. Like, how is anyone going to beat them? And then they lost in round 1.
That is insane to me.
Look at Tampa, the crazy Tampa season.
Tampa's a bit.
And, like, that's a more recent example. That's a contemporary example. They got swept by Columbus.
Okay, so that year, actually, Detroit lost in the conference final to Colorado.
Okay.
Winning.
Sorry.
So that happened. Also,
Tampa is a much better example.
Tampa's a much better example. Also, if memory
2019
serves,
Tampa Bay Lightning.
yeah, they're a better example. If memory serves, that year for Detroit, that's the year they beat the Blues on that OT winner from Steve Yzerman. Yes, that's the year when that happened. See, time does mash up our brains a little bit. I'm glad we looked that up because we get to remember some hockey history in the process.
We're not afraid to show our work here. We don't have to pretend that we have everything mapped out and we know everything. Like sometimes we have to work through it together. And there's probably someone out there that knew that all along. They're like, you idiots! Like, why are you wasting 25 seconds talking about? Like, I just keep CJ. Then they lost in round 1, and so I was like, no, they didn't. No, they didn't.
No, they didn't. No, they didn't. But I like the fact that we correct ourselves on that because like there's so many times I'll listen to like the SDP and I'll be like, no, the answer is this. No, it's that. And I've like in the early days, I would like text Dangle and be like, nah, like this is how it happened. And then I think I had that one episode where we were trying to list off there's something to do with draft picks, but I got like a pretty crucial detail wrong, and it had to do with Jesperi Kotkaniemi. And then after that, I stopped doing it because it's like, you know what? We all make mistakes on these shows. So I'm glad that we were able to look back on this one, look back at their season and be like, oh no, that's not exactly how we remembered it, because it would have driven up a lot of people crazy if we let that stand, that the 95-96 Detroit Red Wings were defeated in the first round when they were eliminated in the third round against the eventual cup champion Colorado. Anyway.
And then they won the next 2 cups. Then they won the next 2 cups.
We've belabored the point long enough. Putin 83 asks, what's wrong with Gabriel Landeskog? And is he ever going to play hockey again?
Yes, he's going to play hockey again. Unfortunately, he's had a terribly long road back from knee surgery that he had in the fall. But, there's still optimism that we'll see him in the playoffs. I mean, it's kind of crazy to think the last time we saw him essentially wearing an Avalanche sweater, he was parading the Stanley Cup around Amalie Arena, early last summer. But yes, I think he'll play again. And I hope that for his sake and the Avalanche sake, we see him reemerge in time for this year's postseason, because he had a hell of a season last year. Helped captain that team to a cup, and obviously the Avalanche's chance of repeating get much better with him in the lineup.
2 more quick ones for you. Do you dream of covering hockey games or hockey trades in your sleep, especially after the deadline? This is from Dr. Sun on Discord.
I actually rarely dream at all. or I don't remember my dreams very often. I don't know which it is, but I very rarely remember a dream. I'll tell you though, I still occasionally have a dream that I'm playing and winning the Stanley Cup, which is like odd. Like I don't know why that is. But I don't have very lucid dreams. I don't have dreams I remember, and I don't have dreams about working. No. But I have dreamt for sure that I was like somehow like going to win the Stanley Cup or the Masters. I don't know. I mean, it's so funny. Like I might be the worst golfer known to man, pretty much. And I still like, I love golf as a sport. I like watching on TV because of my hand issue. I'm not sure when I'm going to be able to play it again. Might not be a summer of golf. I'm still recovering with my mitt here. But anyway, somehow I can't even swing a golf club right now, but I dream of winning the Masters too. So go figure.
Oh, can't wait for the Masters. Adil Pickle, last one for you. As the NHL adds more teams, do you think they would ever go to a promotion relegation model with the draft covering both leagues?
Do I think they'll do that? No. Would it be interesting? Yes.
Yes.
I'll tell you, like there's American Hockey League arenas that are bigger than Mullet Arena, right? Like the team Coachella Valley, Seattle's farm team, regularly plays the home games that have more attendance than the Coyotes currently have. And so that would be the one argument against the model, right? It's just like the AHL teams in general can't really compete. But maybe who knows what time will bring. Like I wonder if we're always going to have a draft. Forget just relegation promotion. I mean, if every player was just a free agent, they would be free to make their own choices. Obviously, still teams would sign with maybe some of the less desirable or worse performing teams because there's opportunity there. There's a chance to play. There's a road right to the NHL. I think, look, everything does evolve and change. Like use your imagination. This sport is going to look drastically different. The business of the league, the way it's played, the rules in 20 years than it looks today. I mean, go back 20 years and watch a game and watch how different it actually is. I mean, time, as I said, goes fast and you forget. But if you watch the game from like the late 90s to now, it doesn't look like barely the same sport. I mean, they're wearing skates and all that. And so what's it going to look like in 2045? I wouldn't, who knows what's going to happen? I mean, I certainly do think we're going to see more expansion too. Not necessarily right away, but as we discussed last episode, I think that just makes too much sense not to do it from a business standpoint. So maybe we keep growing and evolving and changing and we get relegation and promotion. And I think it would add a good wrinkle. I mean, as someone who supports Wrexham, top of the table right now, trying to claw their way up, you could have that. You could have, the Texas Stars trying to get into the NHL or something. Who knows? It'd be cool.
Whatever hockey equivalent you can of Leicester City going from Division 2 to eventual Premier League champions in a couple years. Some of the biggest, arguably the biggest underdog story you can imagine. I mean, that'd be fun to see down the line. Anyway,
I just think the arenas is a barrier though, right? Because soccer ground, like in London, how many amazing soccer grounds are there? The City of London, England. I mean, you can't have that many NHL style rinks everywhere. And as we know, it's still a challenge to get NHL style rinks in every NHL city.
Very true. Thank you to everyone who sent in questions. Siege, we got to get out of here. We will be back on Thursday with a brand new episode of the CJ Show. Subscribe to the podcast however you listen to podcasts. For CJ, I'm Julian. So long. Enjoy the week. We are getting closer and closer to the Stanley Cup playoffs.
The Chris Johnston Show.
Powered by Sports Interaction. Wanna bet?
Inside the game, twice a week. Follow Chris on Twitter @ReporterChris. And follow Julian McKenzie @JK McKenzie.
The Chris Johnston Show.